Have you ever wondered how the most vile legends are born? How incredible and sometimes horrifying rumors transform into an unshakable history that echoes through the centuries? Before us is exactly such a case, the story of Isabella of France, a queen who was subjected to one of the most disgusting and depraved smear campaigns in the Middle Ages. Forget everything you have heard about her before. The truth is much darker, deeper, and inevitably leaves a mark on the memory. In the year 1308, 13-year-old Isabella, daughter of Philip the Fair, King of France, was sent to England at her father's insistence, a man famed for the destruction of the Knights Templar and for subjugating the Pope to his authority. Philip, despite the nickname the Fair, was cruel and uncompromising. To him, his daughter was a pawn in a great political game. Her fate was sealed. A marriage to Edward II, King of England, was to be a union of two kingdoms. But upon arriving in England, Isabella faced a harsh reality. Her new husband preferred the company of men, not in a friendly sense, but in a way openly dangerous for that time, when such relationships were punishable by death. His favorite, Piers Gaveston, did not merely enjoy royal favor. He effectively ruled the country, receiving lands, titles, and jewels that should have belonged to the queen herself. At their wedding, Edward barely noticed Isabella, completely absorbed by his beloved, while courtiers cast her pitying and condemning glances, a silent picture of loneliness and betrayal. But Isabella was not merely a martyr. She observed, memorized, studied the secrets of the English court, the relationships among the nobility, their ambitions and enmities. She learned the language and carefully mapped the power dynamics in the kingdom because she understood that to survive, she would have to do more than just play for survival. She had to learn to win. Gradually, rumors began to spread through the palace. No one could explain why the queen increasingly hid in her chambers and engaged in secret negotiations with influential advisors. These movements were the first sign that Isabella was beginning to change the course of events, using not only intellect and cunning, but also a ruthless game of political power, where slander and even the most shocking accusations of immoral behavior, which she was later branded with, were merely parts of a deeply calculated struggle for the throne and a place in history. It is well known that in political history, ambition often drove people to the brink of madness, overturning the fates of entire countries. And Isabella's fate is a classic example of how truth can be distorted beyond recognition, and the victim herself becomes a master of political intrigue. If you appreciate such calm stories about history, please subscribe to the channel. It's free and helps me continue. Why does the queen meet secretly with advisors and possess political insight rather than show interest in embroidery or prayers? By the year 1315, these questions had grown into dark rumors that chilled the blood. The English court could not comprehend the idea of a woman knowledgeable in politics. Therefore, they chose an explanation familiar to themselves. A clever woman must be a witch or something even worse. Accusations arose that Isabella of France engaged in pagan rituals in the dark, conducted demonic correspondence, and that her intellect was the result of deals with the devil. The most horrific accusation was a connection with animals. Yes, with bestial filth. The most terrible accusation was bestiality. Yes, with animal filth. Rumor had it that the daughter of a powerful European king engaged in intimate relations with animals right in the royal gardens. At first glance, this sounds insane. Yet in the 14th century, such accusations carried a terrifying logic. A smart woman was a witch, an independent one was possessed, and bestiality was the ultimate fall below human dignity. This charge placed her outside Christian society, turning her into a monster. And the worst part, these rumors did not arise by chance, but were skillfully sown by someone who knew well how to strike down an influential woman. In a society where women were expected to be submissive and silent, ambition was seen as a threat. This person was Hugh Despenser the Younger, King Edward II's favorite after the death of Russell Gaveston in 1312. This cold and ruthless man possessed a sharp mind and soon transformed Isabella's destruction into a masterpiece of medieval propaganda. But there was one thing he did not reckon with. Isabella was not a fragile court toy. She was the daughter of Philip the Fair and inherited not only his intellect, but also a passionate desire for revenge. Her subsequent fate completely changed the understanding of the rules of medieval politics. Hugh Despenser embodied everything Isabella hated about the English court, a cunning, cruel, and merciless player in the political game. His strategy was to eliminate the one woman who truly threatened his power, not only because she was the wife of King Edward, whose connection meant little, but because she embodied a living link to France, England's chief rival at the time. Moreover, she stood out for her intelligence. Despenser understood that the English nobility was already whispering about her, and the political tension between England and France gave him the perfect pretext to stoke suspicion. Gradually and cautiously, he began to build a smear campaign that became one of the earliest known tools of political propaganda. He dared not openly accuse the Queen. That would have been too risky. Instead, he planted doubts among scribes and monks dependent on his patronage. He said, "It is strange how often the Queen visits the stables at night, hinting at indecencies and secret meetings." These hints and rumors eventually became a powerful weapon, undermining Isabella's authority and reinforcing the cold hatred toward her among the English nobility. Thus was born the legend of the she-beast queen, an image that spread far beyond the court and entered the history of medieval Europe forever as a symbol of fear of an independent and intelligent woman who challenged the norms of patriarchal society. Do you know how often the Queen visited the stables at night? At first, it seemed merely incidental, but some courtiers had already noticed it. Isn't that strange? Such words were enough for the rumors to take root. They did not spread immediately in a torrent, but like a contagion, slowly and insidiously, mutating along the way, passing from palace to church, from tavern to market square. The accusations became increasingly specific and horrifying. People whispered about nighttime visits, dark rituals, and animals kept not for riding, but for something far more disgusting. People whispered about nighttime visits, about grim rituals, about animals kept not for riding, but for something far more repulsive. Specific dates, places, and alleged witnesses appeared. Legends whispered that Isabella supposedly summoned demons in the company of witches, organized orgies by moonlight, kept a horse trained for obscene purposes, consorted with dogs, drank the blood of the innocent, and called forth darkness. That was their cunning. The rumors were not vague accusations, but carefully constructed to be remembered forever. The main insidious plan was to employ the full set of medieval superstitions: fear of witches, disgust at perversions, hatred of foreign influence. It was not merely about disgracing the Queen, they wanted to make her inhuman. The goal was crystal clear. If Isabella ceased to be seen as a woman, then everything she said or did would lose meaning. She became a monster, a sorceress, the devil in human form. Who could believe her after that? And for a time, it worked. The rumors spread throughout England, from castles to monasteries, from kitchens to cathedrals, each time acquiring more horrific details. Isabella was portrayed not just as depraved, but as a true reveler in evil. They said that under the full moon she turned into a wolf, lured children into the forest, and devoured them. That she led bands of witches who mixed animal seeds with the blood of virgins for black magic. That was the level of fantasy society reached. Why? because it was easier to believe their queen was a supernatural monster than to accept the unpleasant thought that she might simply be smarter than them all. But Isabella knew the truth. She understood that all this was a calculated disinformation campaign and did not panic. Instead, she began gathering her own notes, recording exactly who spread the lies, who benefited politically, who profited from her humiliation. It resembled the work of an experienced spy making a list for revenge. At the same time, she changed tactics. Instead of hiding, she walked through the palace halls with her head held high, radiating defiance. She smiled at her enemies and looked them straight in the eyes. She did not deny the rumors because that would only strengthen their power. Instead, she turned the entire disgraceful farce into a joke, making her detractors look desperate, which threw them into even greater confusion. Then they only increased the pressure. The rumors became almost absurd. They said Isabella did not just consort with animals, she became one of them, that she howled in the forest at night with bloody claws, that she made a pact with Satan himself to control wild beasts and raise the dead. Yes, in the English imagination, she turned into a werewolf, leader of a satanic cult, child murderer, a true monster in female form. And some nobles, educated men believed it, because propaganda, if conducted properly, does not require truth. It only needs repetition. However, the main spreader of these rumors went too far. The rumors became so outrageous that even some of his closest allies began to doubt. In the corridors, suspicions were already whispered, and that meant the campaign's rise to satirical absurdity was gradually turning against itself. Sounds of doubt and anxiety echoed through the castle halls. The sounds of doubt and anxiety echoed through the castle corridors. Hesitation, a growing sense of discomfort and uncertainty gripped the courtiers. And Isabella, she saw how these cracks penetrated deep into the foundations of power. She understood. It was time to act. How to destroy a man who tried to turn you into a myth, a bogeyman. You had to play the long game. Take everything he used against you, every lie, every unkind word, every whisper, and turn it all to your advantage. You had to become so terrifyingly effective that rumors would cease to matter. Not to be a victim, but to become the monster everyone feared. That moment came with war. In 1324, England and France clashed in a conflict known as the War of St. Sardos. And at the decisive moment, King Edward II made a fatal mistake. He sent Isabella, his supposedly monstrous, unreliable wife, to negotiate peace with her brother, King Charles IV of France. Many at court considered this a brilliant move. If you sent the savage queen far from England, settled political intrigues, and at the same time easily removed all blame from her if the negotiations failed. But Isabella understood that this was her golden opportunity. In March 1325, she arrived in Paris. She was no longer the young girl who once wept in the shadows of the English court. She returned to her homeland, among nobles who remembered her not as a terrifying myth from English taverns, but as the daughter of the French king, a true princess, heir to royal blood. And she did not come here to cry, but to execute her plan. Her first move was brilliant. Isabella convinced her brother, King Charles IV, that their 12-year-old son, Edward III, should come to France and pay homage, that is, a vassal oath for the English possessions in Gascony on behalf of his father. This ritual was a usual feudal act, normal and expected. Edward II could not refuse. In September 1325, young Edward arrived in Paris. Thus, Isabella secured exactly what she needed: the heir to the English throne, her son, now under her protection, beyond the reach of the king and his circle. This was the beginning of a chess match in which she moved closer to victory with every move. Then came the boldest move. Isabella refused to return to England despite her husband's pleas, threats, and orders. He wrote her many letters demanding her return, but she did not answer a single one. The most famous of her replies was the phrase, "I will not return while there remains a wolf in the flock." This was a direct reference to the rumors portraying the king, her husband, as a true beast. This image proved genuinely poetic. For years, English chroniclers mocked Isabella, calling her a she-wolf, and now she turned this metaphor against them. The story began to change. If Isabella was a she-wolf, then someone had driven her to that state. If she was dangerous, it was because she had been betrayed. At this moment, Roger Mortimer appeared in her life, an influential English aristocrat exiled for participating in a rebellion against Edward II, and his favorite, Despenser. A man with military experience, political skill, and most importantly, a thirst for revenge. He met Isabella at the French court, and their relationship quickly became more than just political. They openly loved each other, without pretense or apologies. The queen, who had been accused of brutal licentiousness, was now not merely the king's enemy's mistress. She did it publicly, in full view of everyone. The scandal was enormous, yet at the same time, a brilliant move. For thanks to it, old rumors and gossip lost their power. She ceased to be the she-wolf of nighttime tales. She became the queen in exile, reclaiming her power, executing her strategy, having found love and an ally. It was true psychological judo. By filling the space for scandal with real and controllable facts, she nullified previous conjectures and legends. Why invent fables about savage pleasures when there was proof of genuine betrayal? Isabella outplayed the king and his favorite at their own game, and this was only the beginning of her victories. Imagine a medieval queen preparing to lead a military campaign against her own husband, the king. It was unthinkable, but Isabella of England managed to overturn the entire political game. In the winter of 1325, Isabella and her new ally, Roger Mortimer, ceased to be merely lovers. They became like-minded conspirators preparing a grand design, an armed invasion of England led not by a rival for the throne or a rebellious feudal lord, but by the queen herself. Behind this venture was not just a power-hungry political calculation. Isabella intended to destroy the man and the system that, through shame, lies, and humiliations, sought to break her will and deprive her of influence. Her goal was not limited to victory in the struggle. She wanted to completely annul the legacy of Hugh Despenser, the King Edward II's favorite, and the monarch himself, ending their power and historical significance forever. And how did she achieve this? Isabella was not only clever and cunning, she skillfully presented herself not as a traitor, but as a mother fighting for the lawful rights of her son, the future king. In her passionate letters to English aristocrats, she painted the image of exiles, herself and young Edward III, cruelly expelled by tyranny and injustice. In her words, it was not she who left England, but England that abandoned those who were supposed to defend it. This idea resonated in the hearts of many barons and lords, many of whom had long been disillusioned by Edward's inept rule and his favorite's corruption. Now they had a new leader, the mother of the heir, standing against injustice and despotism. By the autumn of 1326, the planned act was ready. Isabella secured the support of France, obtained a small detachment of Flemish mercenaries, and resources, chiefly political recognition through her son. When, on the 24th of September, she landed in Suffolk, she was not met with hostility. On the contrary, more and more joined her. Not only common peasants and lower-ranking knights, but also powerful English lords, among whom was Henry Lancaster, the king's cousin. When he appeared before Isabella with an army and knelt to her, not to Edward, it became clear power had shifted. The campaign, which had seemed a desperate gamble, turned into a triumphant procession of victors. Why did this happen? because for many years the people had heard only distorted tales about the queen. She was called a monstrous she-wolf. But when people saw Isabella with their own eyes, a calm, confident, elevated yet at the same time ordinary woman and mother, all those false myths collapsed. And Edward the Kun was confused at that moment and instead of defending the crown, fled west with Hugh Despenser, desperately trying to save himself. This act finally confirmed all the accusations Isabella had made. Her husband was a weak, cowardly ruler who allowed himself to be controlled by a parasitic favorite. Meanwhile, riots broke out in London. The homes of Spencer's allies were looted, political prisoners were freed, and the capital turned away from the king. By the 2nd of October, Isabella entered London as a heroine. The one who had once been mocked and accused of devil worship was now welcomed as the savior of the kingdom. But she understood. The victory was incomplete while her main opponent and the king were still alive. Then she set a reward for their heads, £1,000 for Edward and $500 for Spencer. By modern standards, these sums amounted to millions. A merciless hunt began. The two most powerful men in the kingdom became fugitives, hiding in ruined Welsh castles and forever fearing betrayal, even from their own guards. Spencer's father was captured first and executed before an enraged crowd. But Isabella had prepared the most terrible punishment for Hugh the Younger. Interestingly, Isabella reserved the most dreadful revenge for Guy the Younger, a cruelty beyond all conceivable limits. He was captured in October, and the subsequent events resembled medieval horror rather than an execution. He was hanged but not immediately taken down from the gallows. He was still alive when the tortures began. Castration, dismemberment, his internal organs were removed, and his body was cut into 4 parts. The quarters of his body were sent to different cities with a clear warning. This was a message from Isabella, unambiguous and terrifying. This is what happens to those who try to destroy me. In the past, she had been accused of monstrosity, but now she became the embodiment of true horror, and the people greeted her with enthusiasm. The downfall of Guy the Younger did not happen quietly, but with no less cruelty. He was captured in November and brought before Isabella, showing a broken man, deprived of will and hope. However, the queen did not kill him then. The murder of a king remained a sin too grave even for her. Instead, she staged a flawless political performance. Under strong pressure, in January of the year 1327, Edward II was forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his son, who became the new king, Edward III. Isabella appeared in royal colors, while the former monarch, dressed in black as if attending his own funeral, relinquished the throne. This staging became a kind of political spectacle that worked flawlessly. Rumors about villains like Isabella disappeared. The image of the she-wolf was replaced by that of a triumphant mother and regent who saved England. But one unresolved question remained. Edward II was still alive. As long as he breathed, he remained a threat, a symbol and hope for those who dreamed of turning back the course of events and undoing Isabella's revolution. In September of the same year, he died. The official version spoke of illness. There were no signs of violence on the body, the face remained untouched, and the death appeared natural. But rumors arose almost immediately. It was said that the king was secretly killed by inserting a red-hot iron rod into his rectum, causing a torturous death from within. Why such a method? It left no external traces, and the poetic cruelty echoed the accusations of his alleged indecent behavior, which many had mocked him for. To this day, historians debate whether it really happened, but one thing is certain: the timing was too convenient, and the method too unusual to consider it mere coincidence. If the rumors are true, then Isabella outdid all her enemies not only politically, but also symbolically. She buried the monster she was called and took control of her own image. But her power was not eternal. Edward III, her son, grew up, watched, learned, and waited for his turn. Eventually, he rose against his mother, but that is another story. If you are interested in the final act of Isabella's astonishing life, the fall of the she-wolf and the return of the throne to her son, the story is yet to come. And Isabella herself remained in memory as a woman who refused to play by men's rules, becoming someone far stronger than merely a hero or a villain.